This is Technically Legal, a podcast about legal technology, innovation in the legal industry, and the impact tech is having on the law. I'm Chad Main, the founder of legal services company Percipient, and on today's show, I'm having a conversation with Kamron Graham. She's the executive director of the Commons Law Center in Portland, Oregon. That's a nonprofit law firm that provides sliding scale legal services for people who don't qualify for legal aid yet can't afford to hire a lawyer. We haven't done a ton of shows on access to justice issues, so that's why I'm pretty stoked about today's episode with Kamron Graham, who's the executive director of the Commons Law Center in Portland, Oregon. The Commons Law Center is a not-for-profit law firm that helps people that make too much money to qualify for legal aid, but maybe don't make enough to hire a lawyer. The Law Center helps out people facing evictions, or those that might have family law issues, or just need help with wills and estate planning. After high school, Kamron headed to the Northeast and went to college, where her initial career plan was to grab an MBA and pursue a career in finance. But she pretty quickly figured out that her empathy and concern for others may not always align with a career on Wall Street. So after college, she headed back to Oregon and started a very busy career in social work. She worked in group homes, she worked at homeless shelters, and even did a stint with the United Way, among other jobs. Working these kind of roles, Kamron figured out that having a professional degree might help her have a greater impact on people's lives and also give her an opportunity to use her education to help others. So in her 30s, she decided to go to law school. After law school, Kamron continued her career helping the underserved, including work for the Legal Aid Services of Oregon and also serving as a public defender. But eventually, she landed at the Commons Law Center, where she started as a tenant defense attorney and eventually ascended to the role of executive director, where she serves today. As we will hear, in Oregon, and I assume this is probably true for most states, about 70% of the people that have civil legal issues don't have a lawyer. So that's where the Commons Law Center comes in. They don't do free legal work, but they use a sliding scale fee system based on a client's income. The cool thing about this, too, is currently about 70% of the Common Law Center's operating budget comes from the fees they collect from their clients. But to fill the gap, they also rely on donors, foundations, and grants. Also, apropos to this podcast, we will also hear that the firm also relies heavily on tech to help streamline their processes and keep costs down. I was excited to sit down with Kamron and record this podcast because I really dig what she and the Commons Law Center are doing, and I hope that others, after listening to this, will be inspired to do similar stuff. Also, I would like to give a big thanks to a former Technically Legal guest, John Grant, who's also a board member on the Commons Law Center, for making this all happen and introducing me to Kamron.
Well, I can say that being 18 years old or 17 at the time, I just wanted to get as far away from wherever I was from as possible. Got there and then not immediately, but about 7 years came back. I do love the Pacific Northwest and my family's here and my community's here, but as a young person, you want to get away for a while and do the most extreme thing possible. And for me, that was New Hampshire.
When you were an undergrad, I think I read somewhere you wanted to get your MBA, or you did get your MBA, you wanted to be a trader, you wanted to go into finance.
Yes, that was the original goal. I often joke that I am the epitome of the 1980s child who, grew up in the era where everybody was supposed to drive an amazing sports car and wear expensive clothes. And that was my original intent, was to work on Wall Street, make a lot of money, get an MBA. But, once I got to college and had some real life experiences. I worked in group homes. I worked with people with mental health issues. It's just not doing those things and helping people who are underserved or, vulnerable just didn't feel right. So pretty quickly fell away from the idea of making a ton of money, getting an MBA and driving a Ferrari at the time, I'm sure, or a Porsche. It seemed just right to just use whatever privilege or education I had to actually help people.
Was there a light bulb moment? Because you do obviously do a 180 here. You go from, capitalism to nonprofit and to, serving the community. Was there something that clicked one day like, this isn't for me. This is excess, or I want to do something different?
I feel like it was a little bit of a buildup, but there was definitely just, what felt good at the end of the day. And, like I said, I was in college. I ended up working in group homes with people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. And it was probably one of my favorite jobs to this day. Absolutely loved it. And I would come home at night and just feel really good. And then I would go to these business classes that talk about, tax exemptions and, capitalist structures. And I'm just like, that dichotomy just doesn't feel right. I'm not sure I had like an aha moment as much as I probably had an aha for years at undergrad. And I think to an undergrad, you just get exposed to so much that you have opportunities to meet people that you didn't get to meet growing up or from your high school and hear other people's experiences. And, it's just it was a gut reaction. It's like what feels good and what doesn't.
And so pre-law school, we'll get to law school in a minute because you ultimately get there, but you work at United Way, you work with homeless shelters. You have this real long storied career in the public service sector, but you decide to go to law school later in your career. I think you're in your mid-30s. Why then? What kind of triggered you to go then?
I mean, I think part of it was age. I don't really think I had this one aha moment for law school like a lot of my colleagues did. Well, I think literally what it was spending all those years working in mental health with homeless folks and with other groups of people that were often, unrepresented or ignored in society. And it was just like, I really just kind of thought about it one day, like, what's the best way for me to serve people? I've been doing what I'd been doing for about 12 or 13 years. I also probably had like my pre-midlife crisis, which is, I'm going to be 40 in like a hot minute. But, what I noticed is that there's so many opportunities for people, or so much power rather, for people who have a law degree or a medical degree, any sort of advanced degree, to make things happen for people. So right or wrong, I noticed that there was just a power difference. Somebody had a JD behind their name to make a phone call or write a letter and be able to change somebody's life. And that's what I wanted to do. Felt like it was the next tool in the toolbox that I needed. And I thought maybe I could still make enough money to maybe like have a pretty decent, life for my family. That was a little bit selfish, but then I ended up just doing nonprofit work anyway. So it was still about helping people and helping raise others up.
I was going to ask that because, then you did get back into serving the public and the underserved. You worked at Legal Aid Service Oregon. You were a public defender for a while. You were a clerk. I think you were a guardian. So you did this work, but was there ever a time where you thought about, well, maybe I try to make a couple bucks, but still serve an unmet need? Maybe do criminal law like as a private attorney versus a public defender, something of that nature.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I interviewed at a couple of really big firms in Portland and Seattle, and got some job offers. But again, I was sitting in these interviews, and I didn't feel good about it. I was meeting. I won't name the firm, but I was meeting with the hiring partner, asking him, kind of what his day looked like and how his life was. And he was like, "Oh, it's great. I'm home every night by 8 o'clock to tuck my kids in." And I was like, "That sounds horrible. Like that's why." And then I would talk to, the new attorneys and associates working for him, who are great people. They really love their job. And again, it's just a different culture, but they were just like, yeah, we work like, 60, 70 hours a week and they make far less than the managing partner, but they seem to be doing a lot of the grunt work. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. And there's so many, they were basically serving corporations and businesses. And I'm not against that at all, or just like anybody who does those things. It just wasn't for me. I wanted to actually help people who had no other resources. So I did pass on a couple of big firm opportunities, both based on ethics, but also just based on like work-life balance.
Ultimately, you get to the Commons Law Center. I think you start in 2022. How do you get there? How'd you get hired? How'd you find out about the position?
I'd met Amanda Cathell years and years ago when she first started the Commons, and I've known John Grant because he and I both served on the Board of Governors for the Oregon State Bar, and I knew that he was board chair. And I had been working at the Public Guardian's office for almost 10 years through the pandemic, and that was just emotionally rough. All of our clients lived in nursing homes or group homes for the hospital. So many people died from COVID. It just, by the time the height of the pandemic was over, I was exhausted. And I was away at a conference, and I just didn't feel like I could go back. And so I randomly sent an email to John and Amanda and said, "This is weird, but can I just come work for you? Like, I don't even, whatever you need me to do, I'll just do it. Like, I'll be an entry-level attorney, whatever you need me to do." And they didn't respond for a couple of days. So I was like, oh no, I've totally mucked this up. They're thinking I'm not well, or it was an inappropriate ask. And then a couple of days later, John called me and he was like, "We're actually looking for a tenant defense attorney." And then that morphed into a tenant director. And then by the time Amanda and I got done talking, they had created a deputy director position for me so I could come and do legal work, but also some administration and some management. Obviously, I accepted, did that. And then at some point, Amanda, she'd been executive director for quite a while, was ready for something else. And I had gotten a job offer from another nonprofit wanting me to come be the executive director. So when I was in the process of resigning with Amanda, we'd had this idea that she and I would just switch jobs. And so I became the ED and she became the deputy director. And I got to turn this other organization down.
Oh, wow. But you're happy. You enjoy your role.
I'm thrilled.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the best.
And so let's talk about this. On the website, the Commons Law Center is described as a nonprofit law firm that offers sliding scale legal services, practical training for lawyers, and community legal education. But if someone's at a barbecue to ask you what you do and what the Commons Law Center do, how do you describe it?
My go-to phrase is that we provide legal services for people who aren't qualified for legal aid and people who can't afford a private bar attorney. So we're filling an access to justice gap. I think the Oregon State Bar actually did a research project a couple years ago studying civil legal needs and found that, I might be off on the number, I have to look up the precise number, it was something in like the high 70s to mid 70s percentage of people who had civil legal needs did not get representation in Oregon. Either they weren't qualified for legal aid due to their income or capacity and could not afford a private bar attorney. So in all the areas which I consider to be the people's law, and I'm putting that in air quotes, so things like family law, tenant law, trust and estates, minor business disputes, most people were going at it pro se. So obviously that's an access to justice issue. It also clogs up the courts. It takes longer for a person representing themselves to get through the process. And, there's lawyers who still don't even start the process even after graduating law school. It's like constant learning, and we're expecting these people to come in and, fight for their housing and for their kids and for marital assets without any training. And it doesn't work well for anybody. So that is, our main objective is to fill that civil legal needs gap. And right now we've identified the three that we can manage, which is tenant eviction, family law, and then trust and estate / probate. We've also talked about doing some small business clinics, guardianship and conservatorships. I see that in our future in the next couple of years, just being able to identify what the people need,
Right.
really, and trying to figure out how to fill that gap.
How do you qualify? I think you've got to be some certain level below the poverty line, but obviously you don't qualify for legal aid. So you have some money that you can spend on legal services, but not enough to really hire an attorney generally.
Yeah, our cutoff is 400% of federal poverty guideline, which, again, without the chart in front of me, I think is like $58,000 for a single person. So it seems like a lot of money, but I'm not even sure I could afford an attorney, quite frankly, private bar attorney. It's a lot of money, and just because you make close to $60,000 a year with, rent in the housing market in Portland, I'm imagining vast majority of your income goes towards housing.
Right.
So you can't afford a luxury, again, putting that in air quotes, of an attorney, no matter how dire your legal situation might be. So you have to make hard choices. Do I pay my mortgage or rent, or do I try to get custody of my kid?
Yeah. And did I see somewhere that on average, the hourly rates for the law center is about 50%, about half the going rate?
Again, it's a sliding scale, so it's based on a person's income, and we base our sliding scale off the mean average of attorneys doing the same thing in Oregon. So we're scaling it to what the market is asking for, but also trying to keep it on the lower end to be as affordable as possible. We've got essentially 6 tiers that we can help people qualify for. Vast majority of the people that come to us are on what we refer to as tier 1 or tier 2, which is our lower tiers, which qualifies them from basically less than $100 per hour legal services, all the way up through tier 6, which is closer to market rate, but not quite our market rate.
I saw too, that I thought this was interesting, that the fees the Commons Law Center generate, pay about 70% of the budget. Does that still hold true?
That is pretty true. From a business model, my goal would be to have those programs be self-sufficient off fees, but to keep our fees low, it's basically economically and mathematically impossible. So we do rely on donors, foundations, and writing grants. We have a couple of yearly campaigns that we work on to get a stronger database. One of our local newspapers has an annual giving program called Give Guide through Willamette Weekly. We've been a partner last year and hope to be a partner with them again this year. We'll try to throw a couple of events throughout the year to build a basis. We call them fundraisers, but build a basis of people for support. Just getting our name out there. But it's been a pretty good year, especially for our trust and estates program, being able to generate enough income to be close to self-sufficient.
So let's talk about that. You're trying to be self-sufficient. So you are running a business. It's not, although
Yes.
it's helping with access to justice issues, you're still trying to run a business. What do you think are the differences between running a for-profit law firm versus the Commons Law Center, other than obviously maximizing your hourly rate and working 2,000 hours of billable time a year?
Yeah, I think there's some things that we do. The business piece of it is big. We have somebody who works on marketing and social media and outreach. We do presentations to community groups and other firms. We're the firm that, the for-profit family law firm who charges, $750 an hour. If they get someone who calls who can't afford that or they're full, they can send them to us. And so, we do some relationship building with people in the community. So in some ways, we have sort of a traditional, we go out and we get clients. We use, Google ads and all of those things, a lot of technology. I think what makes us unique is that we do have that buffer of foundations and donors. It gives us a little bit more room to be able to take the time to teach new attorneys, for example, or to try innovative things. Like, COVID was not great, but it allowed us to do a lot more practice virtually across the state, which a lot of people weren't willing to do. We've been able to maintain. A lot of for-profit law firms won't experiment with new models or new technology because it takes
Right.
time and resources away from them. It gives us a little bit of luxury to be able to do that. I think it's allowed us to have some creativity about how we offer those services. So, for example, with the family law program, we want to actually get the person in and out at the lowest possible rate that they can afford
Right.
that gives them the proper services. We're not looking to pack extra hours in or expand, the time it takes to litigate something so we can have our billable hours. We want to find the least expensive but most efficient thing for that person. I think what's interesting about this sort of hybrid model is that most people who are drawn to it are people who want to do or have done legal work for free. So people who've worked for legal aid or the government. So, one of the challenges in this is just finding that balance between, yes, we're a business and also we're helping people. I think that's one of the biggest sort of learning curves we've had as an organization as we've grown, because we've had what I would call sort of the straight up business model, right? Like we track efficiency, we track productivity, we track callers and if we convert them to clients and how many services we can get them. We try to, and again, I'm using so many air quotes on a podcast, but we try to sell people additional work, but we only do that because we've identified something in their case that they really need that we think that we can help with. And so it's a balance between that and we're just not trying to get the most billable hours from each person. We're trying to get the right services for that person that they need at an affordable price, while also making sure that they know what the legal issues are so we can help them identify it and know whether or not that they should, access us as a legal resource. What's the most inexpensive way for us to do that? Is it coaching or is it representation or is it limited scope services? We try to figure out their budget.
When we come back in just a couple minutes, Kamron fills us in on the differences on running a for-profit law firm versus a nonprofit organization, how the Commons Law Center gets the word out about their services, and how they use technology to increase efficiency and lower costs. I'm Chad Main, and you're listening to Technically Legal.
We need to do more with less. That is the key takeaway nowadays from almost every survey of in-house counsel. But what if it didn't have to be that way? What if you actually could do more for less? By combining legal expertise and technology, Percipient enables legal teams to get more work done for less. Buried in contracts and sales is frustrated with turnaround time? We can help with that. Did you just get hit with a subpoena and reviewing 100,000 documents and files will tax your resources or cost you a small fortune in billable hours? We can help there too. Our team of legal professionals leverage tech and project management principles with the right amount of human oversight to deliver precise, efficient, and cost-effective legal solutions. Whether it's legal operations and contract management support, subpoena compliance, or document review, Percipient is your partner in really doing more for less. Percipient. Legal services powered by technology. We need to do more with less. That is the key takeaway nowadays from almost every survey of in-house counsel. But what if it didn't have to be that way? What if you actually could do more for less? By combining legal expertise and technology, Percipient enables legal teams to get more work done for less. Buried in contracts and sales is frustrated with turnaround time? We can help with that. Did you just get hit with a subpoena and reviewing 100,000 documents and files will tax your resources or cost you a small fortune in billable hours? We can help there too. Our team of legal professionals leverage tech and project management principles with the right amount of human oversight to deliver precise, efficient, and cost-effective legal solutions. Whether it's legal operations and contract management support, subpoena compliance, or document review, Percipient is your partner in really doing more for less. Percipient. Legal services powered by technology.
All right, we'll get back to my conversation with Kamron Graham of the Commons Law Center in just a second. But before we do, I want to point you to tlpodcast.com. At that web address, there's an episode page for this episode and every other episode we've done. On those pages, you'll find links to more information about our guests and more information about some of the stuff they talk about. If you want to get a hold of me, you can find me at cmain@percipient.co. That's C-M-A-I-N at percipient.co or on LinkedIn or X. All right, let's get back to my conversation with Kamron Graham. She's just about to fill us in on how the Commons Law Center gets the word out about the help they can offer.
You mentioned a couple things there. You mentioned social media, which is very interesting. I hadn't thought about that before. Unlike a lot of other law firms, social media is probably a right place for you to find potential clients, and then you track the metrics, which is great too, which a lot of for-profit law firms just don't, although they should. Where is it that you find you get your most clients? Is it referrals? Is it online searches? Is it social media?
A lot of it is social media. I think working with Google Ads has been huge. I made the unfortunate mistake during a budget crunch last year of temporarily pausing our Google Ads, and our referrals just plummeted.
Wow. Yeah.
So I, to this day, deeply regret that decision, but learned a lot from that moment. I think secondarily is referrals. I think we are really excel at customer service, which is another important part of our model, making sure that people know that we're still there and to answer questions. So we get a lot of people who refer their friends or coworkers. And then I think third is that referral from other legal providers. So people that legal aid can't serve or the private market can't serve, or other nonprofit law firms or clinics refer people to us.
Google Ads is interesting because I think it's kind of a commonly known fact that AdWords for legal are expensive, some of the most expensive out there. So is that kind of why you kind of put it on pause for a minute, because it is an expensive endeavor? Or does Google give breaks to organizations like yours?
It's called a Google grant. It still requires us to, I think, have financial investment in it. But it is less expensive for us than it would be for a for-profit organization. Relatively speaking, for us, it still costs a pretty penny, which is why I unfortunately paused it for that month. But it's worth every dime. And we have a consultant that we work with who helps identify words and helps with our placement and things that, quite frankly, I don't understand, but my staff do, about how that works and how we can couple that with the other social media that we do, or blog posts, or any sort of writing that we do, that we can use similar Google AdWords so it gets captured all across all the platforms that we're using.
That's great. What are the challenges? Obviously, having to watch the budget and not being able to charge market rates. But what are other challenges you run into as a not-for-profit law firm, but still trying to pay as much as you can to be self-sufficient?
I mean, obviously, you hit the nail on the head. Finances is always an issue. It's something that frequently keeps me up at night, just wanting to make sure everybody gets, paid and have their health insurance and has all the resources they need to do their jobs. I think the other thing is just people understanding what we do or don't do.
Right.
Being a nonprofit law firm, there's a lot of assumptions that we don't charge people. And that's not true with the exception of our eviction defense program. Right now, we're getting some funding from the Portland Housing Bureau in Multnomah County to be able to provide free legal services. So that aside, in understanding our limited scope engagement. So limited scope engagement, I think, is a very underutilized tool to make legal services accessible for people.
Explain what it is. You disaggregate the legal services.
Yeah, so basically we break them apart. We used to call them unbundled. So, Joe Schmo comes to me, he needs a divorce. Instead of saying, great, we'll do this full representation from beginning to end, we can say, well, we can help you, file this motion, and it'll be $100 for us to do this, and then give you instructions on what to do next. You may or may not need us for the next part of that process. So we're breaking apart what we can do for people, either unbundling that, or in the family law context, providing coaching about what to do in the next steps. Sort of like teaching a person to fish sort of metaphor. Not everything has to be done by an attorney per se. And I think that's where people get a misunderstanding and maybe sometimes push back against our model, is that we're doing something in a way that's non-traditional and sort of challenging the way law is practiced, and other firms and other providers to think outside of that traditional box and make legal services affordable and accessible for people. This isn't a criticism of anybody. This is just the way the system's always worked, right? You get a lawyer and they do all of these things for X amount of money. It's usually a big chunk of money. Or we can be like, we can help you with this thing, and this actually might get your case resolved by doing this little slice over here. And we're going to teach you how to do it, review it, support you for this smaller amount of money that you may not need. And I think, limited scope representation, which is that, very precise, we're doing this one thing for you. It's also different because most people think, look, once I have a lawyer for all of my legal needs. It's like we have a lawyer for this very specific thing. So it takes a lot of education for other lawyers, the client, and the court to understand this completely ethical and underutilized way of providing legal services for people.
Do you still run into pushback from the bar? I remember I was at an event. I've told the story 500 times on the podcast, but I'll tell it again because it still gets me. I was at an event put on by the State Bar Association, and the subject of this came up, like these limited scope representations. And there was, several people stood up and basically said, we can't do this. It's going to take business from me. It's going to take this and that. But the fact of the matter is they weren't serving these people anyways because
Exactly.
they weren't going to work for these lower rates. So I hope that kind of pushback is gone, or is it? Or do you still see that out there?
There was a lot of pushback for precisely those reasons. And we had the same argument, at different organizations that I won't name. Again, we are serving the people that are not getting served. So if you, lawyer X from the firm want to charge $50 to help this person, knock yourself out. We fully support that. The fact of the matter is this person is not getting any representation. And there's nobody like banging down their door to help them for one reason or another. And so the argument that we're taking away from other people's legal services is it's just not true. The people that we were serving are those people who fall into that justice gap that the bar identified. So from the bar, like the Oregon State Bar as an institution has been supportive because I think we, again, it's an access to justice issue. We've gotten some pushback from private bar attorneys. I think less and less so as the days roll by and they see that their bottom line is not dropping due to our existence. In fact, we refer people to them that are outside of our scope or outside of our financial confines. So I would happily talk to or debate anybody who thinks that we are this limited scope model or our organization is taking any business away from anybody else. In fact, we're probably creating more business just by bringing people in and then being able to refer them out when they don't qualify for us.
Yeah, so use some legalese is baloney. That's just a baloney argument. Switching gears, you've already talked about you as a not-for-profit law firm are generally more apt to think about innovative ways of getting your work done. What role does tech play in there? Like what kind of tech are you using? How have you seen tech help you get work done more efficiently and at less cost than, say, someone that's not using it at a for-profit law firm?
I think tech is our best friend. We have a physical space. We don't require anybody to go there. There's a couple of people who like to go to the office, mostly because they have kids or a partner that they need to have a little break from. But otherwise, we're a virtual law firm. And, even before COVID and sort of the remote work phenomenon that happened, we were ahead of that curve, being able to do remote meetings with our clients, having remote meetings with teams. And so the whole Zoom, WebEx, Google Meets, we were doing that even before COVID made it necessary and sort of fashionable. We also are very very invested rather in just automating our systems as much as possible. So we find this balance between warm and engaging human outreach with our clients. And also there's a lot of that sort of onboarding and intake process that can be automated. That's a lot quicker for the potential client and a lot more efficient for us. And so our whole onboarding process for most people is done online and electronically, and all of that scheduling can be done through Acuity and through other apps that we use. So we don't have to worry about, you leave a message, we call you back and leave a message. You call us back and leave a message. We still don't have an appointment. They give up on us. They've moved on, whatever. Like it's all anything that we can do more efficient to make it easier on the client, the potential client to come and join us for services is paramount. And then we've also got a lot of document automation.
Yeah.
So if a person's going to come in and say, my name is, Chad Maid and I've got XS problem, why should you have to repeat that information 20 times for older forms? Like it just goes in, it gets auto-populated. We can send, for signatures electronically, engage with people electronically, and vice versa. And so we don't have paper files. I mean, there's so much of that back and forth that we've gotten rid of that makes us more efficient as attorneys and paralegals, but also wastes far less of the time for the client. I think one of our big victories lately is that we are live and in person at the Multnomah County Courthouse doing our tenant eviction program. And we've automated almost the entire process. The intake is on a QR code. That auto-populates all of our internal information. It auto-populates any answers and fee waivers that we might need to produce and print out. So we're not having to sit down and our notices of appearances is all coming from that initial intake. And so we just cut out on so much time just sitting there filling out forms for people, which allows us to help more people. If you know John Grant, you know that we use the Kanban board system to track our cases, and I love that.
Everybody should listen. It was 2 or 3 episodes ago. He talks about the Kanban method, but to your point and to his point, because they're coming together here, is he said one of the biggest bottlenecks is getting information from your client. It's kind of twofold. The lawyer doesn't want to do it because they may not want to call, and the client maybe just doesn't know how to look for it or doesn't want to deal with it. And if you can automate that process and make it easier on everybody, it's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really anything that we can do to make it easier on the client, they still have human interaction. They still have, personalized check-ins and follow-up and services, of course, but all of the administrative stuff, we would spend so much time. The irony is that we'd have, somebody who would answer the phones while they're on the phone, 5 other people call, leave a message. You got to take time, call those 5 people back and it just exponentially grows, right? Like by the end of the day, you've got 25 voice messages because you tried to call 5 people back. Those people are stressed out, anxious, need some assistance. If you're calling a lawyer, you're probably not having a good day,
No.
right? So it's causing them more anxiety to play this game of phone tag, or they've moved on someplace else or given up, which is the worst possible outcome for them. So them just being able to provide us information quickly and efficiently and to be able to schedule themselves or get their initial engagement letters and work agreements with us done quickly and efficiently. Like, we can do all that in the same day instead of playing phone tag for days on end. They're filling out forms and sending forms back and forth. And they don't have to come down to our office to sign anything. They don't have to find childcare. They don't have to find parking. We just send it to them.
Yeah, and there's no reason a law firm of any size shouldn't be doing this, especially how easy the tools are nowadays. There's no reason that the whole onboarding process shouldn't be automated.
With that, we do still have sort of the old-fashioned options for people, because tech does not work for everybody.
Right.
Works for vast majority. We do recognize that some people, for whatever reason, access to tech, education level, experience, whatever, we still will onboard people with paper documents and phone calls when necessary. But vast majority, regardless of age, income, where they live geographically, vast majority of people are on board with our automated and electronic systems.
So future plans. I know right now you said you mentioned family law, you do evictions, you do the trust estates and probate. Are there plans for other areas of law other than business? You mentioned small business. Are there plans to expand in other practice areas? What are the future plans for the Commons Law Center?
I think one of our biggest plans, and probably will happen in the next couple of years, is just basically the scaling up of what we already do. Again, trust and estates, at least this fiscal year, knock on wood, has been very robust. I'm always a fan of people having their life affairs together. And so I'm really happy that, we're able to offer that. And looks like we're probably going to hire at least one, if not two more staff to be able to work on our trust and estates teams. That's super exciting. Same with family law. We have too many people that we can serve. And so scaling up in what's existing. I would love to expand our tenant eviction, not only here at Multnomah County, but to other counties. And then I think as far as subject matter areas, I think you're right, small business. Something actually we used to do 7 years ago. We'd like to bring that back. We also get a lot of requests for guardianship and conservatorship work. There's a lot of families looking for that. And I think there's probably also room for some bankruptcy. But again, it's, we're responsive to the market. And so whatever comes up out of surveys or, requests is what we hope to be responsive to. And I think that's another liberty that we have being a nonprofit legal provider, is that we do have some autonomy on how we scale and what kind of projects we take on.
Kamron, I appreciate your time. If people want to learn more about the organization or get a hold of you, where do you want to send them?
Absolutely. We have a website, thecommonslawcenter.org, and my email address is just Kamron, Kamron, at thecommonslawcenter.org, and I'm happy to talk to anybody. I love the Commons and talking about all that we do.
Okay, that's a wrap for today's episode. As always, we really appreciate you listening. If you want to subscribe, you can find us on most major podcast platforms like Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, etc. Also, if you like us enough, I hope you leave us a favorable review. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, this has been Technically Legal.